A quiet Monday morning in Jefferson, Georgia. 25-year-old Joshua Scott Adams gets into his white Chevy Malibu and drives away from his house. By the time the sun goes down, Josh will have completely vanished off the face of the earth. But what makes this case so deeply bizarre isn't just that he disappeared, it's what he left behind. See, his car was found, his wallet was inside, his driver's license, his cell phone, his cash, all left completely untouched. But then, 4 days later, his shoes were found sitting right by a local pond. But Josh was nowhere to be seen. It's been over 13 years now, and Joshua Scott Adams is still missing. His family is left stuck with a massive puzzle that still doesn't have a single answer. I'm Lisa, and this is CrimeTophia. Before we dive into the mystery, we need to talk about who Josh actually was as a person. And according to his family, Josh was a guy you just couldn't miss. He stood about 6'2" and 240 pounds. His sister Sabrina described him as just a giant teddy bear. He was athletic, super outgoing, loved being outdoors, and absolutely adored his family. He even had his little niece's name Ava tattooed right on his foot. Josh grew up in Jackson County, and he loved to fish. In fact, the piece of land where his car was eventually found was a place he knew well. He went there to fish all the time.
He was just so sweet, so tender-hearted. He was good with kids, and he loves my granny. He was so super sweet to her, and they were really close.
Josh Adams grew up enjoying everything that makes Jackson County great: fishing, four-wheeling, and family.
We grew up, all our family, on the same property.
The Adams clan, a tight-knit family, Josh stepping into a paternal role when his sister became a single mom.
He would go and help me with the birthday parties, and he wanted her to spend the night, and they'd go down the creek and try to catch crawfish.
The Adams lived together and worked together, a tradition Josh continued, working with his dad and brother in the family business until he ran into hard times.
Yeah, he did struggle with his demons and a drug addiction. I think that my mom would still be here if he was here. I saw her physically struggle. Just every day, you just wake up and it's just like, you carry on, but there is a huge void knowing that he's not here.
A heavier side to Josh's story that we have to talk about. Josh had spent years struggling with an addiction to prescription drugs and cocaine. By the spring of 2013, he was fighting hard to clean up his life. He actually went to a strict 6-week rehab program up in Michigan. And get this, he finished the program and came home less than 2 weeks before he vanished. That detail is everything. When he got back to Georgia, his family believed he was turning a corner. He had plans to work with his dad and brother, and he was trying to build a real future. Then came May 20th, and everything shattered. Now, before we look at the day he vanished, something strange happened the night before. According to reports, Josh spoke with a friend on May 19th and mentioned something interesting. He told them he was over in Athens, Georgia, hanging out with a guy who went by the street nickname Pork Chop. Now look, we have to keep it real here. This is just a rumor told by a witness. It doesn't 100% prove Josh was actually in Athens that night, and it definitely doesn't mean this Pork Chop guy had anything to do with his disappearance. But investigators were instantly fascinated by this lead. And why, you ask? Because the city of Athens was about to pop up again. So let's walk through the actual day that Josh disappeared. He leaves his house in Jefferson that morning in his white Malibu. A little later, surveillance cameras catch him pulling up into a local gas station. Then he shows up at a bank in Commerce, Georgia. And this is where the timeline gets kind of messy. Before leaving, Josh had taken a $400 personal check from his parents, and he walks into the bank to cash it, and the security cameras capture the whole transaction. So we know he's moving around, he's driving, and he has cash on him. But then his phone records completely blow the case wide open. Around 9 or 9:30 that morning, Josh makes a call to a contact listed in his phone as Tony. When detectives later track Tony down and interview him, he admits that he spoke to Josh. But get this, he completely refuses to tell the police what their conversation was about. Now, just because someone clams up and won't talk to cops doesn't automatically mean they committed a crime. People have their reasons, but from a detective's standpoint, it's very suspicious. Then investigators find another name in his call log, a contact listed as Angel. Josh had called him multiple times that day. Angel doesn't want to cooperate at first either, but eventually he tells police the exact same story, that Josh had told him he was in Athens with a guy named Porkchop. And then comes the final digital footprint. Cell tower data later showed that the absolute last text message or activity from Josh's phone pinged a tower right on West Broad Street in Athens, Georgia. Think about that map. He leaves Jefferson, hits a gas station, cashes a check in Commerce, and then his phone completely goes silent in Athens. And there is a huge question here that a lot of people overlook. Josh cashed that $400 check, but when the police located his car, there wasn't $400 inside. There was only about $25. His wallet was there, along with his ID and his phone. So where did the rest of the money go? Did he spend it? Did he buy drugs? Did he give it to someone? We have absolutely no clue. But when you're trying to reconstruct the final hours of a missing person's life, $375 missing is a massive red flag. Now, by Tuesday morning, Josh hadn't come home, and his worried father officially reported him missing because at around 7:30 a.m., a neighbor notices something weird. A fence gate on a piece of the rural property owned by Josh's family on Brockton Loop Road had been left wide open. The neighbor goes to look and finds Josh's white Chevy Malibu sitting completely abandoned out in the pasture near the pond. And this is where the case turns into a total nightmare. The car is sitting there empty. His keys were inside. However, all his belongings were still inside of the vehicle. If a guy is planning to run away and start a new life, he takes his phone and his money. Josh didn't. He just walked away into thin air and a massive search began.
People say, I heard it was, wood chipper and he was put in a chicken pit over here. I heard it was a wood chipper and this, that he left there with someone, like I say, against his will or, with his wishes. So.
Cell phone and just
cell phone, wallet with some cash in it, keys. Were left in the vehicle.
But nowhere to be found. Josh is nowhere to be found.
No, sir.
Now, 4 days after the car was found, investigators make a chilling discovery just a few hundred yards away. Right on the muddy bank of that pond, Josh's shoes are found resting neatly together, and right next to them, police find a hypodermic needle inside a plastic bag. Now, let's stop right here. It's so easy to look at a syringe and a pair of shoes and jump straight to a conclusion. But the truth is, we don't know what those shoes actually mean. Did Josh take them off to go into the water? Were they connected to a drug relapse, or were they planted there by someone else to throw off the police? The evidence doesn't give us an answer. All we know for sure is that Josh wasn't wearing them and he was nowhere to be found. Now, with the shoes sitting right by the water, the focus of the search changed instantly. Authorities rushed in with cadaver dogs, searched the entire property, checked old wells, and eventually the family actually paid to have the entire pond completely drained. Imagine how desperate the family had to be, draining a whole pond on their own land just to see if their son's body was at the bottom. But the mud cleared and the pond was empty. Nothing was there. No Josh, no clothes, and no clues. Just an empty pasture and a mountain of terrifying questions. And there's another question that drives people crazy about this case. The timing. The car was found on May 21st. Search parties combed that area for days. And then suddenly on May 24th, the shoes show up by the pond? Very strange. So were the shoes just sitting there the entire time and everyone just missed them? Or were they placed there after the initial searches were already over? We can't say for sure. And we aren't throwing accusations around, but it is a massive detail that makes the timeline feel suspicious. Now, as the years dragged on, the tips and rumors started flooding in. But there is one phone call the Adams family will never forget. Years after Josh vanished, a man cold called the family, and according to Josh's sister, the caller claimed that Josh had been brutally beaten to death by a group of people and that his body was buried out in a rural area near Lavonia, Georgia. The family immediately handed the tip to the police. And and investigators thoroughly searched the area, but they found absolutely nothing to back up the caller's story. It leaves you wondering, why would someone make that call? Was it a sick hoax? Was someone desperate for attention? Or did a caller actually know a dark secret and give the wrong location? We just don't know. The GBI didn't stop there. They chased leads all over the state. And in 2018, a tip led them to a house in Hull, Georgia. They ended up arresting 3 people on unrelated drug charges, but found 0 traces of Josh. Another lead took them to an abandoned farmhouse in Overthorpe County, where detectives used specialized cameras to peer down into an old well. Again, nothing. It's important to remember that just because the police show up with shovels and cameras doesn't mean a tip was true. Investigators have to chase every single lead because they have to, even if most of them turn out to be dead ends. Now we have to talk about the cloud that hangs over this entire case: Josh's history with drugs. Because he had just finished rehab, it is easy for people to use his addiction to explain away his disappearance. People automatically assume, oh, he had a drug history, so he must have relapsed and met a bad end. But we don't know that. Yes, he struggled, and yes, a syringe was found near his shoes, and yes, police looked into local drug circles. But Josh was so much more than his addiction. His family remembers a guy who loved them fiercely. He was a man who was actively trying to fix his mistakes and move forward. And then he just vanished. So could Josh have just walked away voluntarily? Or could that $400 check have been his fund to start over somewhere else? Let's look at the facts. He left his wallet, his license, his phone, his cash, his car, and his shoes. And Josh has never ever been the type of guy to just disappear without calling his mom. If you want to start a new life, you don't leave behind the literal tools you need to survive. You don't leave your phone, and you don't leave your shoes in a muddy pasture. None of this proves foul play, but it makes it almost impossible to believe that Josh just packed up and left on his own. Now, a lot of public missing person databases actually classify Josh's case as a suspected homicide. As of right now, there has never been a single arrest, a public conviction, or any physical evidence showing how he died, where his remains are, or who hurt him. Josh has simply never been found. So when we talk about foul play, we're looking at a deeply suspicious circumstances surrounding the pasture. We aren't declaring a murder as an official fact. That distinction really matters because our goal here isn't to just point fingers and create a villain. Our goal is to bring Josh home. When you lay out all the pieces on the table, it leaves us with 4 possibilities. The first is that Josh entered the water or suffered some kind of terrible accident. But remember, cadaver dogs hit nothing, and the family literally drained the entire pond down to the mud. There was nothing inside. The second possibility is that Josh chose to leave and start over. But again, a guy doesn't leave all of his belongings and his shoes behind to start a new life. It makes absolutely no sense. The third option is that Josh met up with someone he knew that day, maybe one of those phone contacts from his logs. But the police don't have the public evidence to lock a suspect down. And that leaves the fourth possibility, that someone deliberately ambushed Josh, took him away from that pasture, and left his car and shoes behind to make it look like a tragic accident. That would explain all the bizarre clues, but we just don't have the proof yet. But after 13 painful years, the Adams family is absolutely refusing to give up. Over the years, the reward money for answers has steadily grown. It started at $10,000, then it went to $20,000, then $50,000, and recently, the family raised it to a staggering $100,000. That is a life-changing amount of money. But the reason it exists is simple. Someone out there knows exactly what happened on May 20th, 2013. Someone remembers a conversation. Someone knows who Josh was with in Athens. And someone knows where that missing money went, and exactly why his shoes were left by that pond. Someone holds the keys to where Josh is right now. Josh was only 25 years old when he walked away from his life. Today, he would be 38. His family has had to endure over a decade of empty birthdays, silent holidays, and missed milestones. Tragically, his mother passed away a few years after he vanished, never getting to know what happened to her son. His sister, Sabrina, has spoken out about how deeply this nightmare has fractured their family. Imagine living like that, never knowing if your brother or your son suffered or who is keeping the secret. You can't even begin to process the grief because there is no ending, just an empty chair at dinner, a phone that never rings, and a photograph that never grows old. The GBI and the Jackson County Sheriff's Office are still actively investigating this case, and the family isn't looking for online rumors or internet theories. Theories don't bring a missing person home. Evidence does. A witness does. One person deciding to open their mouth and do the right thing can blow a 13-year-old case wide open. Because after 13 years, somebody absolutely knows. When you lay all of this out, it leaves a massive wall of unanswered questions. If you are watching this and you know something, even a tiny detail you think is completely worthless, please understand it could be the exact missing puzzle piece detectives have been hunting for since 2013. You don't have to become part of the case. You don't have to confront anyone. And you can remain anonymous because Joshua Scott Adams deserves so much more than a fading missing person poster. He deserves to be found. His family deserves answers. Josh, wherever you are tonight, you have not been forgotten. I'm Lisa. This is CrimeTophia. And I truly hope that one day soon we get to sit down and tell a very different ending to this story. Stay safe and take care.